Hello, everyone. Good morning, and thanks for joining for our JIRA Portfolio webinar. We're recording this session and we'll submit a link to the recording over the next few days. Our next webinar is scheduled for December 3rd at 11 a.m. Central. This webinar will be provided by Christopher Pepe, and it's designed to be sort of a Q&A session designed to let you ask questions and get real-time answers from one of our most senior experts. If you have any questions, please be sure to provide them via the questions utility in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll go ahead and queue them up and answer them towards the end of the session. On the webinar today from Percipio Consulting, we have Amanda Babb. Amanda is a solutions architect here at Percipio Consulting and will be presenting today's webinar. My name is Shayla Sander. I'm a business development manager for Percipio Consulting, and I'll be serving as your moderator. So we've been Atlassian experts for over 6 years now and are one of 5 platinum enterprise experts in the country. Over 99% of our projects are Atlassian related, and we have hundreds of clients across the US, ranging in size from 20-person companies all the way to Fortune 20 enterprises spanning many different industries. We help our clients with process-centric technology solutions that facilitate traditional business process management, IT service management based on ITIL, and software development life cycles. In the SDLC space, we're helping clients transition from waterfall to agile. So whatever widgets you produce, we help improve the quality and throughput at the lowest cost. As Atlassian experts, we support our clients in all facets of the Atlassian product suite and build methodologies and solutions across the entire line of products. This includes licensing, solutions architecting and implementations, upgrades and maintenance, managed services, hosting, add-on development, and training. So with that, let's go ahead and turn it over to Amanda, who's going to lead us through the webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Shayla, for that introduction. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Amanda Babb. I'm a certified Scrum Master and Solutions Architect here at Percipio Consulting. So really my role in the company is to help implement these tools and processes, not just of the Atlassian stack, but also help streamline the processes that you guys use in your organizations on a regular basis. So what we're going to cover today is we're just going to do some really brief discussion about what exactly is PPM, Portfolio Project Management, how we've managed it in the past with JIRA Agile, what exactly is JIRA Portfolio, how do we manage PPM with JIRA Portfolio as well as integrating that into JIRA Agile. I will give a relatively thorough demonstration, and then of course we'll entertain any questions that come up throughout the presentation. So what exactly is PPM and a PMO and all of these acronyms that we see associated with project management? Well, essentially, what we're talking about is, are we going to get it done on time at the right level of quality within the budget? It's essentially what PPM is. And of course, I am taking a little bit of the liberty of understanding that the people that are on the phone today that are attending this have a pretty good idea about what PPM is. So it mostly provides project managers and large project-driven organizations with the capabilities needed to manage time, resources, skills, and budgets in order to accomplish everything that they're trying to accomplish with a particular project or portfolio of projects at any given time. And so there's some key capabilities that we need to look at in PPM in general, which is pipeline management, resource management, change management, financial management, and risk management. And the capabilities of PPM, with these 5 key capabilities of PPM, we really want to look at what are the tools that are available to us, what do we have in the past, and what are we looking at moving forward with JIRA Portfolio. So when we went through, initially before Portfolio was announced at Summit, as an organization, we'd walk in and say, okay, there's a couple of different ways that we can do this, and regardless of whether or not they were an Agile shop or not, we always recommended the use of JIRA Agile. And this is why. We have this ability to put this third level, this tertiary level of an issue type within any of the execution projects at any given time, right? That epic level of an issue. So essentially we'd start off with basically a request management project where a group of people within the organization would go through some sort of change process, you know, the pipeline management capability, where they'd submit a whole bunch of change requests or projects, whatever they were. Some of them would sit gathering dust in terms of trying to figure out whether or not that's something they could execute on. Inevitably, some of them would be rejected, but then at the point in time we had an approval, we'd go ahead and say, okay, we're good to go, we're going to execute this project. We'd link that down to a single epic or multiple epics in our execution projects, whether they were agile or waterfall. And again, that epic level gave us sort of that ability to manage these projects going forward. So this was a pretty typical thing that we would set up for our clients in order to assist them through pipeline into execution. So then we started to set up boards, and we'd set up boards like Kanban boards, saying with the enterprise view, taking a look at all of the epics that are in flight at any given time. We'd set up some dashboarding to say, okay, here's what the actual work breakdown structure below looks like, and here's how it's tracking in terms of a health perspective. And we'd set these things up so that we could actually help manage those pieces. But it just wasn't quite right. So we ran retrospectives on it every time we completed with a client, and we looked at those 5 key capabilities, and we said, okay, well, we're able to deliver them pipeline management. We're able to help develop a change management strategy. And on top of that, we're able to help develop a third piece. Excuse me for just one moment. And then we were able to deal with risk management. So we were really excited when we found out at Summit 2014 that they were developing and releasing this new product called JIRA Portfolio. And we were really excited about it. We were really interested in seeing what they had to say, and we got a little bit of a taste for it during the announcements and the keynotes, and then we were luckily placed right next to the demo den, so we were able to watch the demo. It was one of the most attended demos during the Summit at the demo den, like I said, which was right next to our booth. It was really cool. So now that we have JIRA Portfolio, we get to add this 4th layer on top of our ability to manage things through a request management, pipeline management piece, and then our execution, where we really get to start looking at overall business strategy, initiatives, how those things tie together, and whether or not we can execute on a business strategy for 2015 or whatever timeline you're looking at. So we get that extra layer in there that really allows us to play with and work with and manipulate the things as needed. So we have the ability to set things like targets and gauge our estimates to see if our estimates even are looking towards the targets for our business strategies. We have the ability to go ahead and set up resourcing and look at what our teams look like, as well as set up things like virtual resources. We have the ability to go ahead and create releases and streams, so we can see individual product releases and how they're going to work together from a scheduling perspective, and then even how they would work together across different streams for different initiatives and things like that. And then last but not least, we can actually get a very clear view of what we expect to see in individual sprints. So as we look back at working through projects with JIRA Portfolio, now we see that we definitely have pipeline management. We're now starting to see resource management with the ability to set up different teams and associate skills and stages with them. We definitely have change management, right? We can still manage those processes in order to get items into portfolio. Financial management is a little tricky. It's kind of a little roundabout as of yet, but I hear that it's in the pipeline. And then the last piece is risk management. So we really have all 5 key capabilities now working with JIRA Portfolio. So now on to the demonstration. So depending on how you guys are running PPM, pretty typically we see something like this, where maybe we actually have somebody starting off in Confluence talking about what are sort of going to be our major business themes or strategies for a particular period of time, say for example 2015. And maybe they have some different change requests, et cetera, that are brought in that they're managing and tracking through different pages in Confluence, project diaries, et cetera. Well, as we look at this, we see we have our themes here. Well, these are the items that we've decided that we are going to work on for 2015 that may be associated with these different business themes. So let's go ahead and set up a portfolio for 2015. So welcome to JIRA Portfolio. When you first install the add-on, you will see that you actually get a portfolio item in your global header. And from here, you can very easily manage plans, create plans, or administer the add-on. Here you're seeing a fully developed plan that we've gone through and worked with. And I'll work with this just a little bit more in a moment. But I kind of want to start you off with, how did I get here in the first place, right? So from your portfolio global header, you have the ability to go ahead and create a plan. And when we're creating this plan, we've got a couple of different options here. We simply give it a title, and we can decide whether or not we want something to be blank, Scrum, Classic, or Kanban. Also, if you've never played with Portfolio before, you can import a sample data set and see how the dependencies work for you. Now, the main differences between Scrum, Kanban, and Classic really has to do with the stages and skills that it automatically enters in there for you. So, for example, on a Scrum piece, it gives you two main stages, which are story writing and implementation. Story writing being writing the stories, implementation being UI, UX, design, etc., right? So that's what the difference is between a Scrum and a Kanban and a Classic. Of course, in Classic, you get more of those waterfall skill stages with the skill sets that go into them as you're trying to define resources and their abilities to then look at scheduling later on. So everything all ties together whenever you're creating a plan within Portfolio. So it's as simple as going ahead and giving it a title. You can then grant access very quickly and easily to either anyone with access to JIRA Portfolio, or maybe this is something that you're just starting for you. So maybe you're the one that wants to just look at it. And if you don't want to actually choose something from a template, of course, 100% you can import a file, and I believe it's a CSV import that you can pull into, and it will start actually creating those items for you, right? So because we actually already have a couple of plans set up, let's go ahead and take a look at our 2015 roadmap. So if we take just a moment, one of the concepts that's really cool about JIRA Portfolio is the fact that you have both pull and push methods in Portfolio. What do I mean by that? Well, you can set up a portfolio and take a look at how you want your dependencies to work and what your work breakdown structure is. And then you can take that information, you can push that into JIRA. And that's actually the recommended way to deal with portfolios because that helps you manage what you're going to be doing going forward. And we understand that that's not going to be convenient for everybody, so they do have the option of pulling information in from JIRA, where essentially you're saying, okay, based on a series of filters and queries, let's go ahead and pull those items in, let's play with the scheduling and the time estimates, and let's see if we can actually hit our releases as expected, right? So you very much have two different methods of either pushing or pulling. So we'll walk through those as we go through the demonstration. So in order to even get to this point, the recommendation that I've found that works the best is we actually start right to left, right? So we've created our brand new plan. Let's go ahead and configure it. So the first piece, taking a look at our permissions. Who's going to have access to go ahead and actually see this particular roadmap at any given time? Because we encourage open collaboration, we recommend that you keep it as open as possible. We understand for business reasons you may not be able to. But in this particular instance, I have this roadmap open to all JIRA users. So if you have a username in our JIRA demo instance, then you're able to look at this and see how it works. From here, we go up to our stages and skills. And again, this is where we're talking about the creating a plan based on their Scrum concept. This is where we get the stages and skills, right? So here we have story writing and implementation. Our skills for story writing is our writing. Our implementation skills are UI visual design, coding, and dev test, right? Then we can look at scheduling. And from here, let me close this down here. From here, we can look at things where a work item might exceed the duration of a single sprint. And if that's true, then we probably need to break that work item out a little bit more. When we're looking at planning, do we want to use days or hours? We're looking at our stage or a sprint constraint. Stages can only be scheduled in different sprints, et cetera, et cetera. So we go ahead and we set these items up. And then we take a look at our data synchronization. So in this particular one, I actually have it set up that our initiatives are very much going to be kept in sync. I'll show you something really neat about that in a little while. And then we also are keeping our epics in sync. We're not keeping our stories in sync currently because part of this relies on, again, that sort of that push mentality from a how JIRA Portfolio pushes and pulls data out of JIRA. And then our last piece here is we can set a backlog limit where we can actually limit how many records that we would bring in, or we can limit our import to up to 100. So this is actually a recent change in their new point release where you used to be, no matter what, you could only bring in 100 records from JIRA. Now it looks you can actually adjust that to a larger number if needed. So once we have our configuration all set up, then we're ready to go ahead and move forward with items such as our reporting, releases, people, and backlog. All right. So from a reporting perspective, let's take a look at our themes. So this is really the first time when you're starting to define your themes that you're starting to bring in your overall business strategy into JIRA Portfolio. In this particular case, we've got those 4 themes from our Confluence space: new features, performance, upgrades, and exploration. And I've set my targets saying that these are how I'd like to focus on these individual areas or themes of our business strategy for 2015. At any given time, I can see, again, what my targets are, what my estimates are, and then if I actually have completed work on those issues, what that looks like as well. Or just to start, I can look at my targets as compared to my estimates. And this really helps us gauge and track, are we on track to meet what we're saying we need our spend to look like for our themes for 2015. We also have the ability to look at this in a bar chart format, right? But I love pie charts because I think they give a much cleaner representation of those actual proportions. So once we've gone ahead and set up just our initial targets, even without our estimates, then we're going to go ahead and move to our people. So again, we're kind of moving right to left, although we did skip over releases, and I'll show you why in just a moment. At this point, let's go ahead and say we've got 2 teams. We've got Scrum Team 1 and Scrum Team 2. And based on the skills and stages that are set up initially when we're configuring our plan, because this is a Scrum plan, we have story writing and implementation. And if we actually expand these out, we can see very specifically the individual skills in those stages. So for example, well, Elroy up here, he is able to both do story writing and implementation, whereas George, he's only able to implement items. Now, if we expand these out, we actually make some adjustments. Let's say George can implement, but maybe he's not a UI person. Then we can pull that out, and that will actually automatically calculate in the background, if you have your calculation set to automatic, to help determine whether or not we'd actually hit our target release dates, right? So we're going to check him back off. So in this particular instance, I've gone ahead and I've set up our different stages for our different teams, Scrum Team 1, Scrum Team 2. A couple of other quick notes is at any given time, your Scrum team will actually average your weekly hours based on the estimates that you've set in their availability. What do I mean by that? So let's go into Elroy and take a look at his details. He's got general availability. Pretty much that means 40 hours per week from JIRA Portfolio. In this particular case, he's actually out on vacation right now, so I've created an absence for him. Also, I can set his availability for 40 hours, basically saying he's a full-time dev, he's going to be working a full 40 hours a week, Or we can adjust that to be something more realistic, say, for example, 32 hours, because typically, well, let's face it, we've got lunch breaks and other breaks. We're not going to be working a full 40 hours. So we can really gauge accurately exactly how long somebody's going to be available or how much time we have available in order to plan our work. We can also set exceptions. So for example, I've got Thanksgiving in here where during that week, no matter what, he's only going to be working at maximum 24 hours, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. He's off Thursday and Friday, so we know that that's going to be an exception. And you'll notice as I mouse over this, I've got a couple of different ways that I can add additional exceptions. I can either click the Add Exception item, or if I very carefully mouse over, we'll see this little green plus pop up, and that allows me to very quickly add another exception without clicking a button and getting a dialog box. So for example, if I also wanted to put in Christmas here, to Christmas, right? And we can set again those weekly hours. Right? So I've added that exception for availability to Elroy, and then you see in the background it's calculating, right? Now you will have to do that for each individual member of your team, but what I want you to also notice in these two teams is I've got Elroy, George, Rosie, Cosmo, and then I have the senior and junior developer. What is that? Well, it turns out what JIRA Portfolio offers is the ability to add a member of a team that's actually considered a virtual member. So not only can we set up and pull all of our JIRA users into a team at any given time, but if we know we're going to have availability for something like a junior developer, or maybe a new developer, as I'm typing this in, it's looking in JIRA for the user, and if it can't find it, then it says, hey, why don't you go ahead and create a virtual user? So even though we may not know exactly who's going to be on those teams at any given time, whether it's a waterfall team or a scrum team, does not matter, I can actually set up a series of virtual users, set up their hours, set up their schedule, set up their skills and stages in order to see how my plan is going to be affected long term. So for example, if I look here at our senior developer, they actually started on the 31st of October. I've got them through the end of December. I've set a description here to basically say all skills are available at 100% during that period of time. Again, they have an exception during Thanksgiving because even virtual users get to enjoy family time during Thanksgiving. So that I have this ability to then say, okay, if I bring in a senior developer for this plan for 2015, even though they only have a limited presence, how is that going to affect my scheduling moving forward? So you've got a lot of really cool flexibility in order to set up, again, what you think your roadmap should look like and allow Portfolio to help manage some of those scheduling pieces. Now, we'll also note here in the people piece that I have Rosie the robot set for here in Scrum Team 1 as well as Scrum Team 2. So occasionally you may have QA folks specifically, this is where we've seen it happen the most often, that are actually split across teams, right? So in that particular case, you just see all I've done is said their weekly hours, instead of being available 40, I've basically split her time in half between the two teams. Now depending, you may actually say it's more of a 60-40 split or a 30-70 split or whatever that is, and that's fine. You have the flexibility to do that. Again, by putting those hours in and saying what their availability is, as well as saying these are the particular skills that this resource will have or needs to have, then we're able to, again, adjust our scheduling as necessary to see what sort of risks we have moving forward in our releases. So we've played with our reports, we've played with our people. Let's actually start taking a look at our releases, right? So again, releases can be broken down into single releases or streams. And here you'll notice I actually have two separate release streams, one for Spaceship and one for Starfleet Academy. Got a little short name and they're designated in different colors. part of the reason we designated them in different colors is because when we pop up our schedule from the bottom, we can actually see the differences in the release streams in the schedule itself, right? So it gives us a little bit of, again, color coding options to take a look at our dependencies and things like that. So in this particular case, this first release stream of Spaceship, although I do have one fixed release date, the rest of them I'm letting them schedule dynamic. So this is really great for teams that are truly running Agile, where they're doing incremental releases until they have something that's a full feature set to be able to release in the big bad world of the web. If I change this to say, actually, instead, I want this to be a dynamic release date, you'll notice from a calculation perspective, my earliest release for my 1.0 version is actually going to be January the 15th. Well, we know that can't happen because sometimes we do have things that have to be released at a particular date. So I set that to fixed, and we notice that the additional releases have changed dynamically dependent on this particular one. And then my second release stream here with the Starfleet Academy, I have set up more as a very traditional monthly release stream. So for example, we've got a November, December, January releases, et cetera, et cetera. So just like in adding users or virtual users into teams, if I wanted to create a release, let's say I wanted to create a release here, and call this a 2.5. Again, I can designate whatever my start date is, etc., right? Well, if I've placed it in the wrong place, I can very quickly and easily drag and drop it. I've got it set as some dynamic scheduling. And I can also say, okay, this is either a fixed or a dynamic release date, right? I can give it a slightly different short name if I'd like to from the overall stream, but I don't necessarily need to. And you'll notice that from a calculation perspective, it says starts after 1.0, starts after 1.5, starts after 2.0. Until I actually tag items to this particular release in the backlog, it will not tell me what my dynamic start and end date is. So that is a consideration. You do have to have items in your backlog if you are using dynamic scheduling. So we've got our reports, got our people, got our releases. Now let's actually take a look at the backlog. So when you're first starting to create one of these plans, again, we've got the push methodology versus the pull methodology. And my recommendation is that the backlog is really sort of the last thing that you start playing with, whether you're pulling information in from JIRA or pushing information into JIRA, right? Why? Because we need to understand what our plan is before we can start thinking about how we're going to execute that plan, right? So we need to know what are our targets. We need to know how are we thinking about working our releases. We need to know who's going to help us work through these releases in terms of resources, etc., before we can ever start with our backlog, right? So if we're looking at a backlog here, again, we have this term called epic. I want you guys to take a step back and remember in the slide where I was saying from an epic perspective, even with a waterfall organization, we're using that as a tertiary grouping of a work breakdown structure. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a traditionally agile project just because we're using an epic. So an epic is a container of a work breakdown structure. Our fourth layer that we get with Portfolio is this concept of an initiative, right? So we can actually tag a bunch of items to an initiative at any given time. So you'll see here, based on my different epics here, fuel usage, energy efficient shields, new weapon systems, etc. These are actually tagged to specific initiatives. In this case, this is tagged to Starship Enterprise. And then down here where we have things like new cadet uniforms, the Kobayashi Maru, star map training, etc., these are actually tagged to our Starfleet Academy initiative. So it's very easy to actually pull additional epics in. Again, think of them from a work breakdown structure perspective, not as a strictly agile construct. From an epic perspective, I can either create an epic down here, or more conveniently, I can create in bulk. Nice. So I can either type, Or maybe if I have some sort of backlog thing running in like an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, or even over in Confluence, I can go ahead and start inserting these in bulk. So for example, maybe I need to put in some Warp 10 capabilities, and you know what? Our phasers are a little bit out of date. And then from here, I can create them either in a single release stream, a single release, or I can just have it calculate, which is pretty cool. So since these are two separate pieces, I'm actually, for right now, going to create them in the Starship release. We give it just a moment to load. And down here at the bottom, here's my Warp 10 capabilities epic and my phaser upgrade epic. And you'll see as I'm mousing over them, it says, hey, this isn't scheduled, so can you put some estimates in here in order for us to understand how it's going to interact with the overall scheduling. So as I look at this, I can add some details. So this particular epic, we need to save the whales to save the planet. Okay, so I've added some details in here, and then I can set what I think the estimate of the epic is, or I can actually add additional stories down below it to let that roll up into the estimate for the epic. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Right. And then here we've got our phaser upgrades. Well, it turns out, you know what, I really don't think that's a spaceship one. I really think that is a Starfleet Academy piece. Very quickly and easily add whichever Scrum team is dealing with these two particular epics, which initiatives these have to do with, and then which themes these are associated with, right? And again, a lot of this has to do with the estimates that I place in. It'll start reworking my schedule, telling me how I'm tracking to my overall business theme estimates, etc. So that's going to be an upgrade. So I've got my performance. So from here, I'm in my Warp 10 capabilities, and there's this little downward arrow. But before that, even in the phaser upgrades, there'll be a little plus sign. So now I can actually start adding my work breakdown structure in here. So shielding to slingshot sun. And let's say shielding is probably going to take us a little while, so we're going to say that's going to take us about 10 days. And as soon as I click off of that and add additional stories down below here, the estimate will actually sum for this particular easy for me to say, particular epic. See, we got a little sum here with 10. Same thing for phaser upgrades. Click the little plus sign. We'll say that's probably relatively easy. I can hit enter, and you'll notice as I hit enter, I'm actually starting to create an even more developed work breakdown structure, right? So I've got my two epics in here, my two new epics, and then now we're going to talk about how we get this push capability into JIRA itself. So Warp 10 capabilities, it's part of the NCC initiative. Let's go ahead and create and link. So we have the ability to create and link, or we can link existing issues. Again, that's that pull versus push, but we're going to actually push this in because it's really cool when we actually can look at this on the boards themselves. So first thing I want you to notice, I've got the ability to create this in whichever project I'd like to choose. This is the project that I'm creating, JIRA Agile Webinar. I can create issues for all related items. This is what I want you to notice here. I've got an initiative. It understands that this initiative is already linked to an issue within the project. So guess what it's going to do when it creates the epic in the story? It will have this linked dependency in there, provided that you do set up your project to accept items like that. So if I go ahead and create and link issues, up to the upper right hand corner, it's telling me that it's creating one of two. And if you give it a moment, it'll actually start creating the second one. And now JEW 93 and 94 have been created successfully. We know this is an epic, we know this is a story. So I've gone ahead and started to push this information in. Let's go ahead and take a look at it from an execution standpoint. So directly from our portfolio plan, we've gone ahead and pushed that information and that data directly into our project, our JIRA project, which is now linked to this particular Scrum board. Here we see JAW 94. This is my story that I've created. Extra shielding to Slingshot Sun, that's associated with our Warp 10 capabilities epic. So I've now gone from plan into execution with the click of a button. Down here is my epic, right? And it still reports just like normal in my Agile boards. This is how many issues are in this epic. This is how many are completed. This is how many are estimated, right? So I can continue to create issues in this epic from here if I'm more familiar or comfortable with this particular layout in JIRA Agile. But again, with my synchronization statistics, I'm able to push and pull information into and out of my board from Portfolio. So this is something that's really super exciting, and I'm not sure that this capability has been demonstrated before, but I think this is the absolute bee's knees. So in any event, so you can see again, since we have our stories in here, I'm able to then take my stories and groom my backlog as necessary, right? So I can pull them up and down as needed in order to go ahead and start create a new sprint, right? Now, one of the other items I wanted to look at is in our epic, if we go to our normal view for our story and then into our epic, okay, so here's our story again, just looks like normal. We've got our epic link automatically created. I hop into my epic, and here we go. This is actually related to this particular initiative issue type. So I've gone from initiative, well, from story to epic to initiative, and I can go back down again. So if I click into my initiative, here we're starting to see the lineup of the epics that are associated with this particular initiative from my roadmap from Portfolio, right? So the traceability has just gone from, yeah, we're creating this great plan, to these are the initiatives that we're attacking as an organization in order for us to better manage our planning and our scheduling. So I'm going to take just a couple moments to take a look at planning and scheduling, right? Seeing how the releases tie back together. And then we'll go ahead and we'll open it up for questions. So when we're going back and taking a look at our portfolio, we'll see a couple of things in the backlog. The first piece is, since we are pushing information into JIRA, we'll actually see some links on the right-hand side that show us the issue links themselves, right? So if we scroll back down here to this Warp 10 capabilities and extra shielding, here are issue links, JAW 93, JAW 94. From a scheduling perspective, depending on our release streams, etc., we can actually take a look at very quickly from our backlog perspective how we're actually going to start fitting these items in together. You'll notice that these three energy efficient fields, minimize fuel usage, new weapon systems, and decontamination chamber, I should say four, are tied together, and they're actually shoved one right after the other. That's because we've set up dependencies amongst these four different epics. So if we actually take a look at our energy efficient shields, take a look at the details, I'll shrink our schedule back down again, you'll see here that it is required by minimize fuel usage, right? We can very quickly and easily edit those by setting what's required or is required by any of the epics at any given time. We can even go down to the story level if we'd like to set those dependencies, right? So that's one way that we can help start managing our scheduling. This little view down here can be as big or small as you'd like, right? So these are all dependent on one another and have to happen in this particular order in order for us to take care of those items. You'll see that the blue versus the red, we're distinguishing between release streams, our Starship release stream versus our Starfleet Academy release stream. I can also very quickly and easily take a look at whether or not I'm going to even be close to my release dates. And you see there's an awful lot of red down here, right? So depending on what I've set my teams up with in terms of what I've assigned them to, I'm pretty much going to miss just about every single date up until I hit January, and then from there I should actually be in the clear. I can also take a look at what I need from a capacity perspective in order to better manage those particular releases. So here I've got writing, UI, visual design, and coding. Well, that tells me, because that's part of the part of those skills stages, I need to go find people or resources with those particular skills in order to get this thing back on track. Same thing down here. These are my free capacities. So whatever is actually blocking me will show up down in this particular view. I can look at my overall initiatives, right? Again, I can look at the dependencies of the epics themselves, or I can get a vague idea of how I need to plan my sprints. So at the point in time that I've pushed all of this information back into my backlog for my Scrum board, I can actually set my sprints based on these recommendations that come from the estimates, the team, and the skills. So again, that traceability piece becomes really super easy to manage and deal with. If you feel like you need a bigger view from a scheduling perspective, of course, up under your Reports tab, not only can you look at themes, you can also look at the overall schedule in different views, as well as the releases in different views, right? So you can get a full screen view of how this all works, and then through a series of filters, you can actually tune even further into what you want to see in order to look at what those dependencies are and how things are going to impact one versus the other, right? So we have a lot of really cool flexible views, whether we want to see it while we're planning the backlog itself, or whether we want to look at it from a release or schedule perspective. One more quick item, I showed you how to go ahead and push information into JIRA. The pull information has to do with just this little import button right here. It asks me to import existing issues, and it's going and grabbing filter information from JIRA itself. So the recommendation is that you already have a series of filters set up in your project. So for example, this is my JAW filter, which is for that particular project, bringing in all issues. I can exclude already linked issues, include parent epics, and again, from a settings perspective, I can get up to 100 in each import, but I can adjust that setting as necessary if I want to import more. So I can even tell it which of these are going to go into which release. If I don't have a name for the epic, I can give it a default name. I can keep my estimates, and I can set a default. So I can start actually seeing my dependencies in this project for this roadmap that I'm pushing and pulling, right? All right, so I'm going to cancel out of this. I know that was a lot of information. Again, I want to make sure that we do have some time for questions. So Miss Shayla, do we have a series of questions?
We do. We actually have quite a few. So the first one is, does the configuration screen change based on the plan template selected?
Right? No, really the only thing that changes from a plan perspective is what it is bringing in from a skills perspective, right? So it's the Scrum will automatically bring in story writing and implementation, Kanban will automatically bring in, I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, and Waterfall will bring in things like design and those traditional stages of the Waterfall project. So that's really the only thing that changes.
Okay, so next question. So you said that exceptions are set up for individuals. Is there a way to place company or portfolio exceptions in the tool?
Not that I've found so far, and that's one of those things is that you do actually have to go in and create the exceptions for individuals individually, to be redundant. There is that little piece where you're going to have to go in. So if you have a really large organization where you're setting up multiple teams, it's probably better to break those down into smaller portfolios based on a team or a series of teams in order to make that input much more manageable.
Okay, great. Next question. If you used fixed scheduling, will the task automatically adjust the schedule backward, similar to a work back schedule?
Yeah, so kind of yes, kind of no. If you're using fixed scheduling, essentially what you're saying is this is when it needs to be due, but it's not forcing it to be due then. It's giving you an idea as to whether or not you're even going to be capable of hitting that release date based on the people and resources that you have associated with this particular thing, right? So it's not going to readjust backwards. It'll just tell you whether or not you even have a chance of meeting that fixed release date.
Okay, next question. Can resources, assignment, availability, or lack of availability show in a calendar view?
Not as of yet. I've heard some rumblings about some of the features that have been requested, and that's one of them. So the best thing that you can do is go on to the JIRA.Atlassian.com. I believe that's the right website. And actually goes vote for a lot of the feature upgrades that have been asked for from Portfolio.
Okay, so let's see. What about cost estimates for team members as well as other expenses, project expenses for tools, prototypes, etc.? Can I track those in a financial portion of the Portfolio tool?
Currently, right now, the financial management piece in Portfolio is all based on hours and resource hours, right? So you would have to do the calculation sort of outside of the tool in order to understand what that asset management is. Now, of course, our friends over at Keto Logic have a really great financial tracking tool, which, if you notice, we actually have it installed in our demo instance, called Folio for JIRA, and a lot of that financial planning and actual dollars earned value management can be managed through that particular add-on.
Okay, next question. Have people successfully imported MS project templates to create resource schedules in Portfolio?
That would be a great question to ask Atlassian Answers. We have not been asked to do that yet, just because when people are getting off of project, they're getting off of project because they're frustrated and they want to start over. But I do know you are able to import via CSV, but that's a great question to go ahead and ask at Atlassian Answers because I'm sure somebody's had that experience so far.
Okay, when looking at an epic detail, looking at related issues, how can we tell initiative links from other related epic links?
Initiative links from other related epic links. Okay, so from a portfolio perspective, we're going to see our initiative links here for these individual epics, right? So these are this left side are our epics. If we actually jump into the initiatives view in Portfolio, we can see all of the epics that are associated with the individual initiatives, right? So here again, NCC 1701, here are all the epics associated with it. And then again, we can even dig further into the work breakdown structure to even look at the stories that are associated with the epics that are associated with the initiatives, right? So we have that capability here. In JIRA itself, if we remember, I showed you very briefly the ability to pop into an epic, see that there's an actual issue linked to an initiative, pop into the initiative, we see all of our epics, etc., right? So there's lots of different ways that we can actually see epics and initiative breakdown structures.
Okay, next question. How do I see when a task explodes and a milestone is getting under pressure?
So when we're pulling information in from JIRA, right, because we're starting to work in there, as we update or change our estimates in JIRA and we sync the two of them together, if we're leaving our releases as dynamic, right, not as fixed, but actually as dynamic, what'll end up happening is we'll start to see our slipping down in these scheduled pieces, right? So as our estimates increase in JIRA, we import that information or sync that information into Portfolio. We leave our scheduling dynamic. It's basically going to start moving these things around as necessary, right?
Okay, so as long as I don't push or pull info to or from JIRA, all my planning can be modified freely without any impact to my active projects.
That is correct. Yes, absolutely. You can take a look at and see how you want everything to fit together without ever touching anything that's actively being worked on in JIRA.
Okay, next question. Does the team administration integrate with Tempo teams if you utilize that feature? Do you have to set up teams twice?
Fortunately, right now, you do end up having to set up teams twice, right? So far, I have not found that the two of them will talk to one another. Now, that may have changed in the past week with additional releases of Tempo teams, or even the point release that just came out for Portfolio. But as of yet, yeah, you're managing teams in two places.
Okay, can we organize by both safe program increments and releases at the same time?
Organized by safe program increments. To be completely honest, I don't know how to answer that question. So again, I would recommend going to Atlassian Answers, or we can go ahead and parking lot that, and I can ask some of my additional resources, and we can always answer that question at a later time.
Okay. What new features are we looking to add under Portfolio for coming versions?
Oh, a whole bunch of stuff. Again, if you go to the Portfolio project in Atlassian's public JIRA instance, there's a whole bunch of feature upgrades that people are voting for and asking for. One of the biggest ones that is the most highly anticipated is right now we're only working with hours and days from a resource planning perspective. So for a really truly agile shop, integrating story points into planning and release planning would be awesome. There is something like that they are working on, so that's one of them. The other thing was that actually just came out in the most recent point release was the fact that you were only limited to importing 100 issues at a time. So if you did have a really big major execution project that you wanted to manage through Portfolio, you ended up having to continuously import series of things. So they've upped that and allowed you to go ahead and sync or import more than 100 issues at a time. Again, go look at all the feature upgrade requests over in Portfolio and go vote for the ones that you think are the best, because they are really monitoring this particular product to see how they can improve it based on customer feedback.
Okay, great. Do the estimates entered in Portfolio show in the JIRA estimates?
Yes, if you link and push, then it does. It's under the more traditional work log feature of JIRA as opposed to things like Tempo. So it does push and it does sync. So if you're logging work to issues in JIRA and you're starting to sync the information back and forth, it will tell you how much time has been worked on those particular items from JIRA in Portfolio.
Okay. What is your view on the limitations of resource planning company-wide?
What is my view, my opinion? My opinion on the resource limitation is the fact that, hey, you know what? This is a 1.0 release. We saw some really great announcements happen from their version 1 to version 2 release from JIRA Service Desk. Again, I think that multiple portfolios or plans can be managed across the organization, and eventually, as they're developing and active developing, you're going to be able to get more better and more effective
resource management in this tool. So that's my view, that's my opinion. That's nothing that I've heard from Atlassian or anything, but I really think that they're focusing on trying to make it the one-stop shop as opposed to having to go outside the Atlassian stack to do portfolio management.
Okay, next question. Does the license seat have to match our JIRA seats? I can answer that. Yes, actually, it does have to match since it's a plugin sitting on top of JIRA. Let's see. Next question. Can you show us a waterfall portfolio?
Sure. There we go. So again, it's going to look a little similar to what we saw in the Scrum portfolio, right? Again, really the only designation between when you're creating a plan, the classic Scrum and Kanban has to do with the fact that it'll automatically set up some stages for you, right? Stages and skills for those particular resources. So Scrum, story writing, implementation. For a more traditional thing, we end up with our skill sets being slightly different, which is design and implementation. And as you move these out, you'll see we have, in this particular instance, design, we've got UI, UX design, technical design, and then under implementation, I just rank this, we have web, mobile, backend, database stuff, testing, etc. Right? So that's really the main difference between choosing those different plans in the beginning. Of course, you can always start with a completely blank one if you don't like more of a traditional waterfall approach, or you feel like you need more detail in those stages, then you can go in and add all that information in by hand. You'll notice this one actually says recalculate. This particular portfolio is set up to automatic or set up to manually recalculate, manual versus automatic. The one that I was working in previously is set up to automatically recalculate as we're making changes. So for example, here we've got our Shiny Web Front End as an epic work breakdown structure container. Here are our wants and needs, our estimates, etc. And here's our release stream, our release schedule saying, hey, it looks like we're actually going to be on time with everything.
Okay. When is portfolio planned for release for the hosted cloud customers?
I don't know off the top of my head. So Shayla, do you have any information from Atlassian on that?
Yeah, I know it's their main concern right now is getting it cloud ready. So I anticipate either with the next release and if not, hopefully sooner. But I do know it's top priority for them right now. Our next webinar, Ask a JIRA Expert, is scheduled for December 3rd at 11 a.m. Central. Thanks again for everyone's time. We'll be sending out a link to the recording in the next few days, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.